We're back with Leslie Jordan here on Country Pocket. The new album is The Agonist. We've got her grandfather's writings running through this, and he does have some family ties that he winds up holding on to. It's clear that his relationship with his brother was fairly important.
Yeah.
First, talk to me about how he handled losing his brother. That becomes a song that I think maybe comes a bit more from you than him.
Yeah, he didn't write much about his brother. It was very, at least not in the poetry. We read a little bit in his journals about their relationship. He was 18 months older than his brother. Um, but he says in a journal that his parents treated them the same. And it wasn't until he got older that he realized that most older brothers got preferential treatment. And he wished that he would have. He said he thinks things would have turned out a little differently. And I think what he meant by that was his brother grew taller than him. His brother had an easier time in school. He ended up becoming a Fulbright scholar and went on to become a Marine. There's some mystery shrouding his brother's time in the service, and um, I think there was maybe some envy or jealousy there from my grandfather's perspective of how do I live up to this younger brother. And so he only really wrote, I guess there's two pieces that we know for sure to be about his brother, and then a couple that I sort of he doesn't have reference to his brother, but I would assume based on some of the context clues that they were about him. So the one that the song came from is a piece titled Elegy, and it's just three lines, and it says, in all the incredible tortoise world, nothing was so unmistakable as my brother's handwriting. And I love that because the title Elegy really implies that there is this looking back on the loss of someone. That is what an elegy is a poem or a song for someone who's passed. And then there's also an intimacy in their relationship. To know someone's handwriting, for that to be unmistakably known, there had to be some intimacy in their relationship. And so it kind of broke my heart when I read that. And I was like, wow, there is this thing that went missing. And I have all these photos of them as children, and they were so close in age. They did everything together. Their parents dressed them alike. I mean, they went everywhere together. And of course, there's going to be like brotherly conflicts, but from the photos it just seemed like they were inseparable as children. And so there was definitely some sadness there as I was approaching this song, and brought it to Luke Laird and my friend Sandra McCracken, and they sort of helped me finish out the song with a few of these other pieces that I imply that they're about his brother.
And then things get really complicated with Sylvia.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Um, you you definitely hinted that there was some complications about the man. What happened?
Yeah, so I remember reading this piece called The Seeker, and it's really beautiful. It starts out, he says, um, now in my 42nd year I no more worship, no more write the easy love poems. I'm selfish, grown shut in with it deep sunk. Understand that I've innocently chosen a difficult experiment, which to abandon now, after so much has been tested, invested, would leave me giddy with idleness, unresolved. But sometimes, Sylvia, dot, dot, dot. I was like, what? Who's Sylvia? And her name appeared in a couple other pieces. And so I was so curious. I reached out to my mom. I said, Mom, who is Sylvia? And she said, it's actually his brother's wife. And um, yeah, so based on another piece of his writing, he talks about how he and his brother's wife ended up sleeping together after his brother passed away. And so it's a really interesting piece. There's a lot of conversation about a place that they went, and a longing for her, and who knows if it was reciprocated, but I definitely think it was a complicated relationship. Who knows when that began, if it began while his brother was alive or only when he was gone. um, But we lost touch with Sylvia. I guess when I say we, my family, she passed away in 2019. But I think that that family relationship was a bit strained toward the end for her as well. So,
I think I can understand a little bit of,
yeah. Yeah.
um, I mean, what does that say about his, I mean, if he's really sitting there jealous of his brother all along, maybe he wanted to step into those shoes. Maybe
Yeah,
perhaps there's something going on there,
for sure.
or more than just some infatuation. Fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You talk about how he lives and dies alone in the first song. Um, you end on a song called All Things with the Milk Carton Kids. It is really the opposite of the live and die alone ethos. It is just so at peace with everything. So I guess knowing what I know about his life, I why did you choose to end on such a sanguine note?
That's a great question. I love that you made that observation. We even intentionally kept the opening track without any harmonies because we wanted it to start with this sort of feeling of isolation, and then we ended with that three-part harmony with Kenneth and Joey, as sort of maybe like a full circle moment for his life. I wanted to end there because that song came from a piece he wrote called Requiem for Bobby, and a requiem is the music played at a Catholic funeral. And in this piece, he talks a lot about the things that happened in his life. And right in the center of the piece is this one line, and it just says, "Oh, all things you've finally learned to love." And I think he wrote this toward the end of his life and was maybe even sort of imagining what it would look like for him at his funeral. I mean, I think that is a common thing to think of, like what do I what did my life amount to, you know? And unfortunately, there wasn't much for him. And so I think he was sort of grappling with this idea of like, what if acceptance is the one thing that I can show for myself? And being a kind person. You know, there was a lot of times he extended a loving hand to someone who was in need. And I think partially because of his addiction, he ended up going to AA and being a part of the program. And I think he really did try to make right a lot of the things that he got wrong along the way. And I feel like that is something that we should all aspire to do, that we're not going to always get it right. But I do hope that toward the end of my life, I can sort of come to terms with all the messy parts of my story. And I think that's what he was trying to do. And so I took that as sort of a way of saying to him and on his behalf that this is your requiem. This is the way to sort of bring that story full circle, in hopes that he would appreciate that and be honored by that.
Yeah, what I think I'm left with is wondering if he was able to mend those ties in real life, or if it was just something that took place in his poetry, in his writings. Just speaking as someone who may be a little more on the isolationist side of the spectrum, it's hard sometimes to know whether your healing actually, I guess, impacts the others around
Mm.
you. Uh, I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I just hope that his uh his requiem, he was able to show some of those signs of healing to the ones that he loved and the ones who loved him, and left them with a little more peace. Because
That's
I have no idea if he would, because I have no idea if I would.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, that's such a beautiful observation, and I do believe that through his writing, those things were resolved, and whether or not it was an extension to those people he loved. I have had a conversation with his cousin, his first cousin, who just recently, she came to one of the shows, and we spent a ton of time together just talking about him, and she really knew him the most later in his life and spent a lot of time with him, um, and she just talked about what a kind person he was. And I think he really truly was desiring to make those connections. And like you said, whether or not it was just in his writing, I would say on this side of it, to have been given the gift for my mother to have been given the gift of all of his work. Um, it sounds like he really was sorting those things out on his own, but then he gave us the gift of leaving those behind for us. Whether he did it intentionally or not, it has been one of the greatest gifts for her and one of the greatest gifts for our family. So, yeah, it's an interesting observation and a good question to ask.
So in the end, you guys did receive some of that peace, but he never exactly got to see amends made, even if somehow
Yeah,
they were.
yeah, yeah. That is definitely a sad reality, and part of what I hope for this record. And I was saying this to some friends that it's one thing to sort of take a man's personal private work and use it for an album. It's another thing to go, well, how can we honor him through it? And not necessarily like glorifying him, because I obviously know like it's riddled with complexity, his story. Um, but I do know one of his deepest longings was to be a published writer. And so he is now. And I think I think and I hope that he would feel honored by that.
All right. I'm going to leave you with the same thing I leave all my guests with, the opportunity to choose a song to play yourself out. The only rule is you cannot have had anything to do with its creation.
Ooh.
Um, can you think of a song that you think your grandfather really would have enjoyed?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me think. I've been listening to a lot of Gillian Welch and David Rawlings, and the song "Dear Someone" I think is something he would really love, and sort of has that same sort of pining for companionship and a feeling of connection, and it's one of my favorites as of late. So I think he would really love that song.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Leslie.
Hey, thank you, Trevor. I appreciate it.